Do you think that could be just the way you're sort of filtering it? Like maybe you're not fully seeing it, like you're not seeing all the details because like you're not in that realm, but like you get glimpses of it, you know? Like because like you probably heard I've talked about my hallucination or whatever you want to call it, my trip on mushrooms where I came face to face with a serpent, and it was very much like a real entity. It wasn't like it didn't seem like I was just seeing like random things or anything, but I could see how maybe that was just lifting the veil of like what was there like in the other realm, but it was very much detailed. Like I could see, I didn't know what it like I could see the details, but I didn't know what kind of snake it was or anything, or so I had to go and like research. I was like, what, like is there a specific kind of snake this was? And then I learned about the different shapes of the heads of snakes. You have like the round, you have like a diamond shape, and then you have like the cobra style, and
with the
so
hood.
the one, right, yeah, the hooded one. And so the one that I saw was more of a python. And then you actually get into a lot of like Greek mythology and stuff, and it seems like they actually talk about a great beast, a great python, and that's where we get a lot of, I think it was it Apollo who like slayed the great python or something like that. I'm not a huge expert in Greek mythology, but you can look into it more and you'll see what I'm talking about. But that's kind of where we get the story of the oracle, and I forget the name of where she like lived. Is it like Pythia or something like that? Yeah, actually that is it. So Pythia was the name of the high priestess of the temple of Apollo at Delphi. So, and she sat over the great pit that I believe Apollo slayed the python and like put it in. So you have this pit where this python supposedly was like cast down into, and then she's getting like insights from this pit and talking to all of these great nations that would come, these great rulers would come to her for advice, and she would often give them advice on war and like what to do and strategies and stuff.
Hey, yo, welcome to the Godcast.
The Lord told me to tell you, wake up, wake up, wake up.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
Was there an awakening moment?
So this is like an all-encompassing awakening.
It's all-encompassing.
Every day, as they would creep in, I would just have to stop and catch myself right in those moments and say, God, I trust you. I'm not going to be afraid. I'm giving you my fear.
And I also came to the understanding what you're saying, what you can't have light without dark. But then I started having the thought of, well, if we didn't have nighttime and we didn't have the winter, then plants would never stop growing. So if we never had issues, then we would only grow more. The thing with me, I never got into the astrology stuff. I never got into really doing any kind of energy work until I was very firm with Jesus. And it's a thing with me and Jesus where like people are praying and I'll get the sudden urge to tell that person to give your burdens to Jesus, and they'll say like, oh, I was just trying to talk to Jesus.
Welcome to Godcast,
the Goodness Over Darkness podcast.
Here's your host, Emmanuel Kingman.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Godcast, the Goodness Over Darkness podcast. I'm your host, Emmanuel Kingman, and here with me is the Dragon Slayer, Mimi.
I'm here.
Hello, my love. I know you're tired. It's been a long day.
Is it really 5 o'clock?
It's really 5 o'clock. We've had back-to-back interviews.
Okay, so 2 in a row. I can't do anymore. That was, I was trying to research for both. Last minute research on one because I was I thought I was prepared. I just wasn't.
Yeah. Well, on today's podcast, we had on special guest Gnomad. So Gnomad is the artist for my bridge song that'll play when we're finished here. He created that in like 14 hours or so out of scratch. I just kind of gave him not even really an idea of how to do it. I was just like, yeah, just like kind of include stuff I talk about on the show. And then boom, he made it. And then I asked him for a video and boom, he made it a separate thing in a few hours with that. So it was incredible. I really suggest you guys go check out his music and his art. He does a really great job. He's a great podcast host as well, so I suggest you go check out his podcast. He's young as well, only 28, but he has been making music for a while, and he really knows his stuff when it comes to the technical side. And he's a man of Christ, which is always a good thing, that he's so very helpful and very knowledgeable about the different Bibles and the different translations. And he does deep research, and he understands things in a way that it's not just like he's not going to believe it just because someone says it. He's going to figure it out for himself. That's what I really like about him. He's someone I bounce ideas off of, that I talk to, and uh, in a messaging, in DMs often. Uh, he's become a very good friend. So, do you have anything? You look exhausted. You look like you don't want to be here.
I look like I have to still make dinner.
Okay.
But I'll be more prepared next time. I wasn't as prepared as I thought.
Well, I mean, you were. You just, think that you kind of lost your steam to talk.
Yeah.
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 Well, it's hard when we get back-to-back ones like this. I mean, I give my guests.
I just feel like we've been in the room all day.
Well, yeah, we have. Yeah.
Yes, we have. So, I've, kiddos to tend to and dinner to make.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we're gonna wrap it up here. It's a quick intro, but it's a great intro. We talk about serpents. We talk about all the different angels. We talk about demons. We get into dinosaurs a little bit. We get into the multiple suns and how the moon is a false light. We get into the different Bible translations, where they come from.
Some of them.
Right.
We'll do an episode where I'm more prepared and I have all my information straight.
Yeah. And we talk about how the Gospels are, just different ideas about the Gospels, that John the Baptist isn't the author of the Gospel of John. We present different ideas to each other, and we talk about them. So it's a really fun episode. It's a really informative episode in certain aspects. He asked me certain questions to elaborate on demons and fallen angels, how they're not the same, and why you shouldn't trust any channeling or anything in the etheric realms, why I say that, and we get into that as well. So we get into a lot of different topics here, and it's just a really fun time. So I think you guys will really enjoy this one. Make sure you go check out all of his art and music on nomad.art. Go check out his podcast. I have all the links are always included in all of my episodes, because he is the artist that does the bridge. And of course, I give him credit in all of my descriptions. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on any of the audio podcasts, you can go to any of the episodes that since the bridge has been put in, and you'll find him on there, because
he always has really great video presentations too. So if you like to watch and listen, that he's definitely got good stuff.
Yeah, he makes slides for his podcast, and brings up everything. He's very prepared.
Very helpful. Very prepared. More prepared than I was.
It's no worries, my love. You did excellent. So go to my website, emmanuelkingman.com, IMMANUEL Kingman.com, and on there you can find so many different things. You can go check out all my photos of the clouds. You can check out all of my I will have a membership section open soon, because that's where I'm going to be posting the Bible study. Make sure, if you want to be in on the Bible study, that you send me an email with the subject Bible study, and just say, hey, I would like to be part of it. So that way I can hit the star on your email, and then when I send out the link, that I can include your email in the the person that I'm sending it to. So that way it's right there. So I will, it's hard to go through all my DMs on 3 different social media websites to figure out who wanted to. That would be a lot of different work for me. So if you could just send me an email, I would greatly appreciate it and be much easier. So after the bridge, stay tuned for the interview. And without further ado, here is the man, the myth, the legend himself, Gnomad.
Welcome to the Godcast. Cross up on my back, I'm slaying demons. It don't matter what you call that. Searching for the truth, facts are facts until they fall flat. It's looking like a story, man, it's all cap. But it's goodness over darkness, it ain't all bad. I'm at my maker, but I was called back. Emmanuel, show my people they're under a spell. Heaven or hell is free will. I made my choice and now it's well with my soul. I pray the same for you as well. Welcome to the Godcast. Welcome to the Godcast.
Hello, everybody. On today's episode, I have on a very talented and creative guest. He is a man of Christ, and he is the artist of the bridge from my intro to the interviews of my podcast. And he hosts his own show called the Gnomad Podcast and recently released his debut album, School of the Soul. Everybody welcome Gnomad to the show. Welcome
everybody
to the show, my friend.
Thank you for having me on. Very excited to chat today.
I am very excited to have you on. So everybody, when you guys hear me say, and after the bridge will be our interview, well, this is the man who created that from scratch. So I want to thank you so much for that because it's wonderful. Mimi dances to it.
I do.
She hears the music in her head.
Now I hear it
it's
in
my
my head
pleasure.
because it's already there.
Yeah.
It was a fun project. I loved it. Anyone else ever want anything like that, let me know. Happy to do it. Happy to help.
Yeah, you did it in 14 hours or something. Like I asked you because we were talking and I asked you, you're like, is there anything I could do for the show? I was like, well, could you do something like that? And I wasn't expecting it for at least a week. And you're like, so when do you
like,
put
"How
out
about
your
this?"
next show? And I was like, well, I'll figure by Friday. And then I wake up the next morning and you're like, oh, here it is.
Yeah, man, that was one of those things where, I feel like the best projects just flow to you seamlessly, and that was one of the ones where it just flew. Like, definitely got inspired. It just gave me everything, gave me the right music, the right lyrics, and it all just kind of came to me.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you were able to do it. And here, let me put the display names up because I want to make sure everyone spells your name properly, Gnomad, and looks you up. Your music is very well done, and you've been doing music for how long now? Like 12 years or so?
Yeah, I mean, I started probably about 12 years ago, just kind of dabbling with guitar, kind of learning little bits of piano and stuff, and then really just kind of I've moved a lot, so it kind of developed into more like beat making and stuff because I was like constantly like giving away guitars and pianos and stuff, not pianos but like keyboards, as I was moving. And so yeah, I eventually just got more into like sample making and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I've been doing lately, is more of that kind of stuff, and then rapping on it as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting. You don't typically sound the way that you look. When I'm listening to it before I ever met you, I was listening to it, and when you hear someone's voice, you get an image in your head. And I've had people say this to me as well, that when after listening to the audio and then going to see the video, they're like, "Oh, wow, you're very different than what I expected," because we build this image in our mind through sound. So it's just it's a very impressive process, and you're fairly young too. What, you're 28?
Yep, 28.
Yeah, so I mean, you've been making music since your teenage years, and you have your album out now, which is I like it a lot. I listen to it. I have it on my computer. I got to get it on my phone somehow. I think that I might have put it on there, but I can't really find it. So I'll figure out how to do it. But I really like the work that you do, and above all, you're a man of Christ. And you and we often have discussions about the Bible, different takes. I like getting your opinion on things. You're someone who uses a different translation than what typically you hear of. I've never heard anyone else say they use the Young's literal translation. So I like to get your take on things when I find out new information.
Yeah, for those who don't know, the Young Literal Translation, kind of the reason I found that and got interested in it was because I noticed that a lot of translations will use, very generic words, just like angel over and over or Lord over and over, even when they're talking about a person that may be of their authority. So instead of actually talking about like God, they'll still use the word Lord. And so for me, I wanted to see that distinction when they're actually saying like Jehovah or Yahweh. To me, it's important to get that distinction. And then with angel, they'll often use angel, but it's really the word messenger. So those are kind of the main ones that made me like to stick to the Young Literal Translation. But the main thing I like to do is I use the YouVersion Bible app, and that allows you to just easily click on whatever verse you want or verses and then click compare, and you can add any version of the Bible you want and then see the differences. And so that's been really helpful. And lately I've been actually digging into Hebrew more. I have my
Yeah,
Hebrew
I
book
actually
here.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, I
So
saw that
yeah, so
post
it's
about
really
that.
it's really helpful and cool to see kind of like what the actual Hebrew words were used in the original text, and then like see how they translated it. And one that's been interesting, I actually was talking with my dad about this last night in the sauna, is we were going back and forth on different words, and he brought up that he noticed one time that the story of Moses when I forget if it's him or Aaron who actually throw down the rod, but they turn into snakes and they're like battling the Pharaoh's magicians.
Sorry.
So in that story, they use a specific word called tanin, and that was the word that they used to describe the serpents, the snakes that they threw down. But that's the same word they use in Genesis when they're talking about, and I can actually just read it. I have it here. So this is, let's see, Genesis 1:21, and God created great whales. And so instead of whales, that would be the same word they use for serpents in the story of Moses, which is tanin. So, and God created the great whales, or you could interpret that as great serpents, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind, and God saw that it was good. So that was just one that was super interesting. My dad's like, do you think Moses was throwing down like a whale? Like his rod turned into a whale,
Right.
And so it's like interesting seeing these kind of differences. And so that's one thing I've been really excited to dig into more is the Hebrew translations of things.
Yeah, well, and that brings us into the story of Jonah and how it's probably not a whale that he's inside the belly of. He's inside the belly of a serpent, inside the belly of a beast, not necessarily inside the belly of a whale, but that's how it's translated to us today. And it's not how it actually should be, because whales to us aren't beasts. We don't consider it to be a serpent. Definitely not. So it's just
Well,
When I think of that, I kind of think of like the beginning of a tadpole. You know what I mean? Like a parasite, a tadpole, a serpent,
like
and
an
then
eel.
like a giant one would be like a whale.
Like where do eels come from?
Yeah, like where do eels come from? Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So in the King James version, which is what the Concord I've been using is essentially referencing, they use that word tanin, the Hebrew word tanin. They use that as dragon. I believe 21 times versus serpent. It's only used as 3 times. So it definitely seems like it's more than just what we think of as like a snake,
Yeah, and
We were just talking about snakes and dragons.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting that when I was saved by Christ, the image that I had in my mind was that I threw up demons. That's what I felt. But the image I had in my mind was that a serpent spit me out because it was trying to swallow the Christ in me, and it got too close to being Christ, so that it made it sick and it spit me out like I was in the belly of a beast that got, and it threw me up.
You've seen that statue, right? Of like, I mean, there's few references, but you can see statues where it's like a person literally inside what looks like a serpent.
No.
Yeah,
I'm not
there's
sure.
pretty
I've
cool.
seen
I
that.
have it. If anyone wants to check it out, I have a thread on my Twitter. It's just I am Nomad. You can go and check it out. I have it's called Why Is It Always Snakes? A thread, and
Okay, yeah.
you can go through that and you'll see I have some slides and stuff, and it'll show that image. But yeah, it's super interesting. This kind of brings me back to like a lot of these stone sculptures and stuff that we see, engravings. They go back to the time of Amaruka with all of the pyramids in sort of the Americas. And you've been reading a book on that, right? I would love to hear if you've gained any
I haven't gotten
insights.
to read it yet, but I
Okay.
bought this book.
I'm the reader.
I bought this book called New World Order: The Ancient Plan of Secret Societies because I typed in Amaruka after listening to maybe it wasn't even your episode, but I heard like two different episodes in a row that talked about Amaruka, which it's a difficult topic to research. There's not very much to it. So I found one book that I couldn't get a copy of. It was either very expensive or there was something about it that I didn't particularly like. But then I found this one, and this book from William T. Still. This is from the 90s, like 94 or something. I don't even know if this guy's alive, but he made documentaries about how our money is, what our money essentially is a system of slave debt. And it's just very interesting. But it talks about, when I typed in Amaruka, this guy was talking about. So I'm very interested in looking into this eventually whenever the power goes out and I have all these books to read. So I don't have too much information into Amaruka though.
Yeah, well, for those who don't know and are just interested in looking more into it, so it's sort of a
Trying to
theory.
save it. I missed it.
All good. It's a theory that essentially that we got the term America because at the time of all of these explorers and conquerors who were coming to the Americas, they all worship the feathered serpent, which is what Amaru meant. So Amaruka meant land of the feathered serpent. And so to me, I don't know, that just seems like more weight than, I can't remember the specific name of the guy that we supposedly named America after. Oh, actually, I have it right here.
Amerigo Vespucci.
Yep, Amerigo Vespucci. So theoretically, that's what we're told. But yeah, I haven't seen much that would actually like it. To me, it makes more sense that everybody here called it that, and it was because it was land of the feathered serpent. But I would love to see if anybody has more takes on that. I would love to have a sort of debate on that, or not even a debate, but just a discussion. On
Discussion.
it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting when you start talking about like San Francisco was already here on maps well before this was called America. Florida was already named Florida as well before this was. So the way that things were told in the mainstream history, it doesn't take too much research to uncover that it's just not true. So the Amerigo Vespucci, it is kind of ridiculous because, like you're saying, with Amaruka, it's the land of the feathered serpent, or at least the land of the serpent, which makes much more sense. We have North America, South America, the land of the serpent. Then we get into the maps that I've looked at from the 1500s that depict dinosaurs, which we didn't have dinosaurs back in the 1500s. That's a word that was created in the 1800s. What it was showing were dragons or seraphim or reptilians, the way that we would know it, that were living in South America, which was very connected to Antarctica, which was called Tierra del Fuego, which is the land of fire, which also had giants in it. And in South America, there is a place, I forget what it is off the top of my head, but it's the land of giants. And it was so hot in Antarctica that it was too hot for humans to go. So they called it the land of fire in the 1500s, in the late 1500s. So that gets into the shape of the earth. And my idea with the Ottoman Empire, how their symbol is a very large sphere, I'll say, because we can't actually say what it is, but it's a very large sphere with a smaller sphere going across, but it's not an eclipse the way we see an eclipse with the sun and the moon being the same size. So it brings up the idea of, was there a larger sun going around a further out ring that maybe exploded, and that's why Antarctica's frozen and why flat earthers think that there's an ice wall going around that Antarctica is surrounding the rest of the earth because there was a larger sun that kept everything from freezing, and now it's not there anymore. It gets into a very weird place. Just like one little piece of information of dinosaurs being drawn on a map in 1589, that connecting to the Ottoman Empire, connecting to so many different things, it brings up a whole different litany of ideas of what the shape of the earth is, where we are in time, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up because I actually, the first kind of word when my dad actually showed me this Hebrew translation book, because he knows I'm interested in this stuff, and like I just randomly opened it up, and before I opened it up, we had been talking about seasons, and like kind of, if we've always had them, if it's in the Bible, and then I just opened it up, happened to open up right to the word seasons, and it's actually more descriptive of the word time. Like I actually couldn't find any evidence of it talking about weather. It was all referencing like traditions and times and like ceremonies and things like that. So I was wondering, like you kind of just brought up how, like, do you think we just used to always be in sort of a tropical climate that was, hot and more, maybe reptiles or like dragons who were more made for that climate?
Right.
And then after the deluge, that kind of changed. Real quick, another kind of fun point on that. My dad recently was on a hike, and we live in the Pacific Northwest, right, where it's like very cold a lot of the time of the year, a lot of snow and stuff. And they found this area where there's lots of petrified palm trees, and you can see them engraved in stones, like the palm tree leaves. And so it's interesting. It seems like there's evidence to support that we used to be in a more tropical climate, even up here in the Pacific Northwest.
You want to know what the etymology of the word weather is?
What?
Time.
Yep.
Really?
Yeah, Hebrew time.
Wow. Yeah, so that's very interesting. So I do think that we were in a tropical climate everywhere, and when we have different evidence of this, that I think it was in the 1200s we had a mini ice age, and then followed by 300 year warming period where everything was much warmer, and now we're told climate change is going to end the world, and it's just not true. The climate just changes
I
throughout
think time was created, and then they tried to figure out how can we divide time, and here comes weather.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Something. I mean, I definitely think when the firmament was opened and we had the flood waters from above, which it used to only come up from the ground, as I understand it. And I think that not only did that change how weather happens, like now we're having stuff come from the above us instead of it just being all sunshine, perhaps. I don't know for sure how it all worked, but imagine in a all tropical climate where you just have water coming up from above keeping everything growing, and instead of just having something pouring down on you. That seems a little bit more kind of, I guess, nice or like tropical. Before, I guess a lot of tropical areas now have a lot of rain coming down, but I think that I imagine something like the whole world being flooded would drastically change the climate.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And when I say a tropical, you and I are talking about, we're trying to come from a point of the Bible, trying to filter information through that. The Bible doesn't actually say the moon. A lot of people, we interpret it as saying the moon, but it says, and maybe interpretations or translations do say the moon now, but the original thing was that there was uh, a light that ruled the day and a lesser light to rule the night. So what I'm talking about here is a larger sun that would make it quote unquote daytime, and a lesser light that would still be the sun that we know would be the lesser light. That the moon is a false light, it's a false object. And why I think that is because it actually gives off cold light. It gives off, when you measure, you could take a laser thermometer and measure the shade at nighttime is warmer than the moonlight. You can take a magnifying glass and measure that, what comes through, as if you were doing it with the sun. You could burn up ants, right? Because it would be much hotter. Well, it turns out that it's much colder when you use a magnifying glass. So there's something about the false light, the cold, that shouldn't exist, that does. So
It's another
it's a
form
radical idea
of
that I have,
time measurement
but there
too.
is evidence to support it.
Yeah, I need to look into the more Hebrew and original translation of that to see how we got that translation and what, because I can't remember specifically. Maybe you guys know. Actually, let me just search it real quick. Do you know how many words are in the Hebrew language?
No.
It's not
Not
very
off the top of
many.
my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's approximately 7,000 or something. Maybe
Not
even
that many.
less. Originally, I think we've added some, but yeah. So there's not very many words. So I would be interested to see like how we got that translation of moon. That's definitely something I need to look into more. The moon, just in general, is obviously so many questions. Like I still don't understand the phases of the moon. It doesn't make sense to me. I'm trying,
Yeah,
and
not the way it's
I'm
explained
sure
to
I'm
us.
just well. Anyway, like I've tried to look at it from every angle, and it doesn't make sense to me. And I'm probably just ignorant on the matter. Someone a lot smarter than me could probably explain it well. But yeah, I just don't understand when I'm seeing like the sun bright in the sky and the moon right
At the
there
same
next to
time,
each
yeah.
other. Why am I seeing like the different phases still?
Right.
So, I mean, I don't even. Do you know how they describe it in the sort of traditional?
Well, they're saying that the Earth is blocking the.
Are they though? Is that what they're saying?
Yeah, that's what it, and
Yeah, it doesn't.
it does
But
kind
they're like
of
both there.
right.
Clearly.
So the way, I mean, I can see how they could do it, because when I look at the moon and I see where it's missing a piece, that they're saying that we're in between, and even though we see it
It's like
appearing as
shading
if
it.
it's going straight across, but that's just like an optical illusion. They're saying to us that it's actually our atmosphere is actually blocking it from, so it could.
I could see that, yeah, where it's like the firmament or whatever, or
Yeah,
not even, or I guess our atmosphere and the way they describe it is sort
yeah.
of blocking some of it. Yeah,
Right,
maybe.
from reflecting, yeah, but it doesn't even make it doesn't really make all that much sense. Well, that's a whole thing into itself. The moon is a very interesting thing. There are ancient cultures that talk about the sky before the moon was there. They talk
Hmm.
about the moon being put in place as if it was some kind of meteor or a spaceship. And then we look at like Oumuamua, that was a few years ago. That was a rock that was there. We're calling it a spaceship. That was,
That was like the cigar shaped
yeah.
rock or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and I think Oumuamua in Hawaiian is something like the messenger, or the
Messenger, I believe, yeah.
yeah. So when we look into that, we can also look at the Napoleon's comet, or Tecumseh's comet, as it's known in different places in the 1800s, 1812 specifically, that was spotted all over the earth. That it was going around to these different areas. Like, was that some kind of scout or something? It's they're using rocks or asteroids to be ships in some way. I mean, it's a weird thing, but what we're told, uncovering all this covered up history in the 1800s and 1700s, and just re-putting together the mainstream narrative to understand it in a biblical point of view, really has me question everything before then. And then we get into time loops and resets that have been happening, and it's just this very weird thing that if time was reset 200 years 5 different times, then the geology and all the science could say, oh, it's 1,000 years old. But if we were reset 5 times, then it would have just been from the 1800s, just from 5 resets ago. So it's this very weird thing that there's different things that we're being told it's from this time period, when it could just be this time period just misunderstood. And I mean, time has definitely been manipulated. Weather, as we now could say, we know they control the weather. And I mean, Matthew Landman breaks that down a million ways from Sunday in his different things that he does. So time and the space that we're in, we just don't know what's going on.
Yeah. So that's kind of one thing I've also been really interested in lately is thinking that we were originally sort of designed to be in this tropical climate, and the way that Eden is described, I've been trying to get back to that. And I think I heard you maybe mention this like a while back on one of your podcasts, but have you looked into starting like a food forest or something like that?
Yeah, it should be next month. Is
Should be,
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
They should
in the
be building
spring
it.
where
Yeah.
they're
Jim
currently
Gale,
they're
Food Forest Abundance.
they're got all our plants in greenhouses. They're growing them
awesome.
essentially to come plant them here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, how many months of the year is it like sort of too cold, or is it
Like a month or so,
Yeah,
a month or
maybe
two.
2 months. I mean, we didn't want to put everything in when it was still cold and then have the chance of it dying off. So we waited
Right.
till spring.
We can have most things like citrus. We could have citrus, oranges or lemons, but it would be a difficulty, and a month's period. We would have to
Yeah, you'd
cover
have to
it
cover it and stuff.
and different things like that.
to help it just survive till like
Yeah, you
get
just
through
throw
that
a
month or two?
blanket over the
Yeah.
plants and stuff. A lot of people do that
Yeah,
around
'cause
So
we're
are
in
you going
southern
with
Georgia.
more, I guess, more robust plants then that will work better in your environment?
So we're gonna have 9 fruit trees, different kinds of fruit trees. We'll have like 20 or so plants that are gonna be, plants that we can use for
Herbs,
teas and
medicinal uses.
medicines and things like that. Now, not your
Nice.
basic like stuff that I could do, like not your basic vegetables that we could just grow on our own, but these
Right.
are gonna be plants that aren't too common.
Yeah, so what they do for you is that they have all these different algorithms, and they have like every edible or medicinal plant that there is in their database, and they figure out your climate, where you are.
Your soil,
Yeah, and
things
they'll
like
give
that.
you, so like rather than blueberries, which are something that isn't great here, they give us
I
something
think
that
we're
is
gonna have elderberries.
right. They give us
Yeah.
something that's
Nice.
very similar that works better in our area. So that way we don't have the GMO, the genetically modified things that would be grown here, like these huge blueberries that taste like parasites to me. We're not going to
Mhm.
have that. We're going to have something that's natural, that is supposed to be grown here, and we're not going to have all these steroids pumped into everything.
And they try their very best not to get any plants from, the commercial type places that you would get your
Right.
plants from. They
Right.
try to go to little farms
Mom
that
and pop places.
that really take pride and care and use less what do you call it?
Mass production.
No, what do you call it? The poison, less poison.
yeah.
Yeah,
You
less.
know.
Yeah, I know what you're talking
You know what
about.
I'm saying?
Like,
I don't know why my brain
pesticides.
isn't working.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that steer away from pesticides. So I'm excited for this. I'm so excited.
For
Yeah,
sure.
that's
They
definitely a
do have to
long-term goal
do
of mine.
they do have to do a little bit of work to our soil because here in Georgia it's very sandy. So that we have to do a lot of work to the soil first before we plant.
Yeah.
Do you
But
know
we
what they're doing for that?
Different
lot of different
nutrients are
things.
going to be kind of tilled in.
Yeah, so what they do is essentially, and so we have a lot of trees here that produce a lot of leaves. So we just let that,
Compost, yeah.
we
Yeah,
let the
natural
leaves
compost.
sit, and then I mowed all the leaves to break them up, and then I have a tiller that I can go further, break them down. But they're going to bring a lot of mulch, and we're going to try to move all those leaves that I already broke down. We're going to move that to where we need it, so that we can make it a dirt. And they say that they use a ton of mulch because mulch will just break down. Everything essentially does break down. Sticks, leaves, all that stuff does break
They'll do a
down
layer
in due
of
time.
cardboard. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you can do a layer of cardboard in order to stop
The
weeds from growing up, but we don't necessarily need that, but you can do it.
Yeah, that always sussed me out a bit. I've seen a lot of people
Yeah,
do
I
that.
don't like the cardboard
maybe
as
it's
much.
Well,
fine,
it's
but
not
I don't
like,
know.
printed cardboard, Amazon boxes. It's not like that. It's an
Yeah.
actual roll of just cardboard, so it's completely biodegradable type roll.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
it's
little
not
bit
just I
different.
mean, we could technically rip the tape off of boxes and do all this extra work, or you can just get a roll of plain cardboard.
Got you. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's what they use, rolls.
Yeah, so we're definitely looking forward to that because, as I was saying, a lot of things taste like parasites to us now, or rotten eggs. We can't eat the
yeah.
same stuff that we were eating. And like we were talking about the Bible times, they were eating nuts and berries, and they were living hundreds of years. They didn't eat meat until Noah's Ark because they ran out of food for whatever reason. But it was nuts and berries, and everyone was much larger, which is very strange to think that only eating nuts and berries you would be much larger. But that's what our teeth are designed for. So that's how we come up with the nuts and berries, because we weren't eating meat. Now maybe fish was also being eaten at some point. I
Fruits
don't
and
know.
veggies.
I don't know
Well, I
when,
mean, yeah,
but
there's examples like gorillas. I'm pretty sure are pretty much herbivores, right?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
frutivores or whatever. But yeah, they're huge. And
yeah, they're huge.
muscular.
Yeah, so it's a very weird concept for somebody who thinks that we have to eat 3 meals a day and goes by the food pyramid, a pyramid, the symbolism. So it's just
Back ass words pyramid.
yeah,
Inverted.
yeah, it's all very weird. So all right, so let's get into the different Bible translations.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Because
about
Mimi has
the
been doing a lot on
Young's
this.
literal translations. They use a present tense or a past tense in that Bible. I was reading some. Oh, they use the present tense more so than most other translations will use a past tense.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
That
you
was just
honestly
one of the
might know
factoids.
more about it than me. That was one that I sort of because I'm like every verse, every chapter I read, I'm comparing all of them. Like the
Yeah.
YouVersion Bible makes it so easy, and
think I
that was
did.
just one that as I was doing that, I started to notice that wow, like they're being a lot more specific in this translation. So, yeah, if you have any more insights on it, I would love to hear about it.
I have a New Believer's Bible, which was just one that came in the mail and has a little study thing in the back that's whatever. And then I compare that to a King James one just because that's what I have here at the house. And we have a couple other versions.
I have NIV that
But
I
what
use.
happened was I listened to an episode with Kara Mosher and Eyes on the Right, and they were talking about, do you know who wrote your Bible? Like, do you ever look at the very front page where it would say King James Bible or whatever it says in gold lettering in the front? And do you know who that is? Do you know what you're reading, where it came from? And then I heard 2 of your episodes, one on flat earth and one on hollow earth. I wasn't necessarily listening for the earth portion, but the fact that you guys were like the Mondays strictly use the King James version and then who is the other
Jim Williamson.
Jim Williamson, he uses something else and you use something else, and so I started to study and look up, okay, well, who's King James, why and where and what. And then I read that and I'm like, well, now I want to know about where these other Bibles came from. Well, there's 300 plus different Bible variations from the beginning of time until now. And I just read that in 2011, the Catholics rolled out the New American Bible because they think that, we're all not very smart. And when we read something like, what did I write down? Oh, what was it that I wrote down? Leviticus, when it talks about you can bring a special
flour
cereal offering to the Lord, they think that present day people will think that means bringing your frosted flakes.
Cheerios.
Like it bothers me a little bit because each translation gets a little more like, come on. So
I
then you have
agree.
to really rewind to like the OGs and start there.
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to get back to the Hebrew, how it was originally written, right? Like, especially going through Genesis and a lot of the Older Testament, thinking about Moses and kind of putting yourself in his shoes and thinking about what the specific words were that he was using, like the one I brought up of the serpent and the whale, right? Like, if mostly that word is being used to describe a serpent, then maybe we sort of translated that wrong just because whatever reason they thought maybe that would make more sense in the context.
Yeah. And we have references in the Bible, in the book of Enoch specifically, about Seraphim, which are serpent-looking angels, that dragons, if you will, flying dragons. So, I mean, it gets into a weird place where they really don't want us to know about it. And somehow a bunch of these Seraphim broke off from the rest and started bringing wisdom to humanity and it wasn't supposed to happen that way. It's a very weird, strange thing to imagine, like a dragon coming talking to you, but then we have different pop culture references like the Neverending Story, where you have that it looks, I don't even know if they call it a dragon in there,
Like a
but
flying dog.
right, that's what it looks
Right.
like, but
Yeah.
that's what Seraphim, that's what they look like. They look like they have the head of a lion and the body of a serpent. That's the Chinese dragon. I mean, it's just depicted in different ways because it's especially something like that where they made like a stuffed animal essentially for that movie. So it's hard to imagine it, but they aren't filled in. Maybe they were, but to me, when I seen these in the spirit realm, they aren't filled in color. They aren't solid color like me, but it's not that you could see through me or see through them, but the edges, the outlines are darker colored, and the uh, the inner parts are more not translucent, but they're lighter colored. It's like a blueprint almost, where you're an artist where you draw heavy on the outline and then you color in lighter in the inside. That's how they everything kind of appears in there. So somehow they went from that world to this world, or maybe we were in that world with them when they were communicating with us, and then we ended up in this one. I don't know what happened. It's a
Do you
very
think
weird thing.
do you think that could be just the way you're sort of filtering it? Like maybe you're not fully seeing it, like you're not seeing all the details because like you're not in that realm, but like you get glimpses
be.
of it, you know?
Mm.
Like because like you probably heard I've talked about my hallucination or whatever you want to call it, my trip on mushrooms where I came face to face with a serpent, and it was very much like a real entity. It wasn't like it didn't seem like I was just seeing like random things or anything, but I could see how maybe that was just lifting the veil of like what was there, like in the other realm, but it was very much detailed. Like I could see, I didn't know what it, like I could see the details, but I didn't know what kind of snake it was or anything. Or so I had to go and like research. I was like, what, like, is there a specific kind of snake this was? And then I learned about the different shapes of the heads of snakes. You have like the round, you have like a diamond shape, and then you have like the cobra style.
With
And
the
so the
hood.
one, right, yeah, the hooded one. And so the one that I saw was more of a python. And then you actually get into a lot of like Greek mythology and stuff, and it seems like they actually talk about a great beast, a great python, and that's where we get a lot of, I think it was it Apollo who like slayed the great python or something like that. I'm
Ooh,
not a
I
huge
just
expert in
had
Greek
that up
mythology,
too.
but you can look into it more and you'll see what I'm talking about. But that's kind of where we get the story of the oracle, and I forget the name of where she like lived. Was it like Pythia or something like that? Yeah, actually, that is it. So Pythia was the name of the high priestess of the temple of Apollo at Delphi. So, and she sat over the great pit that I believe Apollo slayed the python and like put it in. So you have this pit where this python supposedly was like cast down into, and then she's getting like insights from this pit and talking to all of these great nations that would come, these great rulers would come to her for advice, and she would often give them advice on war and like what to do and strategies and stuff. And so that was part of my vision actually once you had Ron Weed on your show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he's talked about how like he had the kind of deal with the devil where they offered him all this great stuff like we can make you famous, knowledge and
Right.
wisdom, and he was all down for it, but then the next step was, all right, well, you're going to have to make a sacrifice.
Right.
And he had this idea of like, well, my brother has diabetes, and I don't think that was his idea. I think that was an idea they were pushing on him.
Right.
And like, like he's gonna die soon anyway, like why don't you just sacrifice him. But he obviously didn't go for it, and he ended up seeing visions of like these spirals in the cosmos, which he interpreted as like God smiling at him is how he felt.
Right.
And so I think that was the same thing that happened to me. Just I was seeing maybe a different entity, but it was the same thing. He was like, I'll give you knowledge, I'll give you wisdom beyond what you ever could have imagined. And I wasn't really into it just because I had been kind of raised Christian, and I have certain I guess, insights and discernment that it just didn't feel right to me. But I think if I would have been down with it, then the next question would have been like, all right, who are you going to sacrifice?
Right.
And I think we've seen that a lot throughout Hollywood, throughout, there's all this talk about deal with the devil. And I think that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's very interesting. So when you saw that serpent come to you, you said it had like the head of a python. Was it a specific color? Was it
Yeah, I
very
remember.
filled in?
Yeah, it was definitely filled in, and it was green. It was mostly green. But you know how pythons, I believe, they kind of have, a little bit of like black and
I'm getting the
brown.
image
But
of the Jungle Book, that big old snake.
yeah.
I think that's probably a python. That's what came to mind when you were talking about that.
Well, isn't there like a? No, I think I'm thinking of anaconda. But
Mm.
actually,
That's
what
what
is
I
the
was thinking
difference
of
between
earlier.
an
Anaconda.
anaconda? I gotta
Well,
look that up.
hey, we get into the Loch Ness monster. Could have been a very large snake head. You know, we have this image that it was this sea monster, but the way that it's portrayed,
Hmm.
typically artist renditions, is like this very elongated head that it could just be a snake, a very large snake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that movie Anaconda. Yeah, when you
Mm-hmm.
said that, that's what kind of brought that to mind as well.
Yeah, they are kind of similar looking. So I think it was more of a python though that I saw, because the shapes were a little on the coat of it. Like its design was more sporadic, or not sporadic, but like filled in, versus an anaconda. It's more spotty, like the
Hmm.
different spots.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when we get into the Leviathan, I faced a Leviathan. I mean, so I faced the Beast of Revelation. We just talked about that in the last episode that we just recorded a few hours ago. I faced that, and then I've also faced a Leviathan 2 different times. Blacker than black. I mean, there's no definition of black, that how black these things actually are. And it's kind of uh like it's so large. It's a snake essentially, but it's just swirling around itself. It's so large that it's just like you think that it's a different shape because the body is so large that it just spirals around, that it could make itself into different shapes, but essentially it has the head of a snake, and its teeth are uh very sharp, and there's an actual
Like
dinosaur.
fangs.
Yeah, yeah, and there's an actual dinosaur that lived in the sea. Well, what we're told is a dinosaur. Again, dinosaurs aren't what we think they are. That is really represented in what they call it. I forget what the name of it is. But yeah, I mean, once I saw that, I was like, wow, that would look like the skeleton of what I saw when I came face to face with this thing. And I chopped it. I had a sword, a flaming sword, that I went in and I cut it up into pieces, and I tossed it into the lake of fire, which was a tear in the fabric of reality happened. It opened up, and it was a lake of fire, and I could see another reality through it. But I was like, oh, okay, this is what could be interpreted as a lake of fire. And he got thrown into it, and it was gone from our reality.
Yeah, so what do you think it is about snakes? Like, do you think that has something to do? I guess you mentioned the seraphim. Was that like the descriptions of the fallen angels?
Yeah, Seraphim are described as serpents that are fallen angels, but they weren't the only fallen angels. There were also the Ophanim and the Cherubim. I don't think that the Cherubim ever fell.
That's what I was gonna say. I know there were multiple types, but did they
Right.
all, or maybe some of the other ones did, but not the cherubim, as you understand, or the
Yeah.
cherubim?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what I know. The cherubim are like the protectors. They're the ones with 4 heads, but it's not even 4 heads. It's 4 faces on one body. You know, face of a man, face of an ox, face of a lion, face of an eagle. They have the 4 heads on them. They also have
Right.
the wheels within wheels, which is Ezekiel's wheel. It's exactly as he describes it. We just can't really imagine it, and the eyes that are all around it. Uh, it's a very weird thing when we get into it. I just listened to this episode, and I encourage everyone to go listen to this. Uh, on Blurry Creatures, episode 89, I See Angels. This guy that Micah Turnbow, who was on there, he's describing he sees and has been a seer since he was very young, and his mother kind of encouraged him and helped him along with it. They were Christian, and he sees the Lord Jesus Christ. He sees all these different creatures exactly as the way I describe them as well, saying that the Egyptian gods are still roaming the earth because they don't have anywhere to go because they're Nephilim. He doesn't use the term Nephilim, but that they're not allowed into heaven, that they're rejected because they're not the pure creation. That it's a very weird thing, but everything that I talk about in my weird understandings and meditations, psychedelic trips, and even my clouds, he is talking about, he sees that with his physical eyes, describing everything exactly the same way. When I heard that, I had a listener, Jesus Vargas, sent that to me. He's the man. He always sends me great episodes. So when he sent that, I downloaded it and listened. I was like, wow, this dude must be one of my brothers. Like seriously, Micah Turnbow must be one of my brothers, because I mean, I describe it in all these different fashions throughout my entire podcast, all my guest appearances, social media, my website, my clouds, everything. And he's saying, yeah, I see that with my physical eyes, and has no idea I exist. So, it's a very crazy thing.
Yeah, well, that's how we actually get the Bible that we have. Is there's been numerous scribes who have sort of copied down all of these ancient texts over millennium, and there's a lot of criteria that goes into that. So like, you have to have the sort of original source, like who was writing it, but then also people who were writing separate things, but that confirmed it, right? So it wasn't like a biased thing. You also had third parties writing about similar things that confirmed it. And then, we found the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that was another huge piece of the puzzle that kind of confirmed everything that we had established as canon. And I think the one sort of outlier for me, at least, is the Book of Enoch, because that does seem, if any of the other sort of non-canonical books and that would have been included in it, maybe that one, but it's obviously debated amongst everybody. But I do think that the Book of Enoch is super interesting, and we did find it in the Dead Sea Scrolls with a lot of the other texts that we have in the canon.
Yeah, and the thing is, why they know that it was real is because it matched up to Ethiopia, had it in their canon the entire time, and it matched up exactly.
That's what I mean about, like, we had these, you have to have a certain amount of evidence of like this story being continued through generations for it to be considered like historical. We do the same thing with like Thomas Jefferson, or like whoever, like all these people from a while back. Like, you have to have a lot of evidence documented by multiple sources that kind of confirm the same thing.
Yeah, and you found something?
I was giggling about Bob Barker. I'm ahead of you guys a little bit.
Oh, you're ahead of us. Okay, Mimi's leading the conversation now. But then
Bob Barker, The Price is Right?
No, the publisher of the KJB.
Oh, yeah, Robert Barker. He wrote the King James
I was
Bible.
like, Bob Barker wrote.
yeah, but so what you were just saying, it's it's greatly fascinating how I come up with the ideas that I come up with, and then later on I have on a guest who confirms it and what they're talking about. It happened big time when I just had Nathaniel Gillis on episode 102, alien abductions and demon possession, and the stuff that I'm talking about. He is researching and he's coming to that understanding. But there is this thing where, if you're a hammer, everything is then a nail. So people could say, oh, he's a demonologist, so obviously everything would be a demon to him. But people are they're trying to put their perception of life into that guy's understanding, whereas he is looking at all these separate things and seeing that there's a commonality and coming to the conclusion that they're all demons. Not that, like, I'm trying to look for demons, that I'm looking at this thing and objectively seeing that it's a demon. And when I have on Dr. Amy Novotny and she's talking about her breathing technique that she came up with, and it's very similar to my breathing technique. She just describes it in a different way than I do. And, that's the same thing just coming to us through God, our creator, in terms that we can interpret, that we understand. But that's like a confirmation. And it happens to me all the time. I don't know how else to describe it other than I get it from God. And when things come up to me that I find out are in the Bible, it really blows my mind. Like the latest thing is with 1 Timothy, the epigenetics, that your decisions affect your grandchildren and great grandchildren, that's how our DNA works. And I've been telling people this for a while now and saying, yeah, your past lives aren't a real thing, that you're remembering your ancestors because you share the same
Choices.
DNA. And your decision now affects your children and your grandchildren and great grandchildren. Every decision you make sets up their DNA up until the time that they hit puberty. And based on your actions, not just you, but the rest of the people that share DNA with you, we're making things happen to our ancestors, and that's why babies are dying. Essentially, that children are having horrible things happen to them is based on their ancestors' choices. Everything is an amalgamation of choices that everyone else has made before us. That's really how it works. It's not random. You know, my mother was very upset when she found out that everything just happens for a reason and doesn't happen just by happenstance, that we could have prevented things, that we could have changed things from happening if we made different decisions.
And the reason is choice. Would you say that your current day choices have the opportunity to amend or change, change or solidify the choices of your ancestors? Would you say that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Is that how you would word it?
The future can affect the past. Is that we can fix everything now. Everyone always has
That
the
you
power.
can amend it or solidify, or what's the other word I'm trying to look for here? Solidify the choices.
Well, so it's more like we're predisposed. Like if we have addiction running in our family,
It's because a lot of people made the wrong decision in a row.
right? But it's ultimately up to
Right.
us whether we become addicts, whether
Right.
we act on. We always have the ability to change everything.
Yeah, I think you get attachments, right? You get different spirits attached
Yep.
to you based on your choices, which will be with you on your journey, regardless of when in time that is. And so, like, I think demons or whatever are lazy. So if you have an issue, an addiction or whatever, I think that they're going to stick around for your children because they're not going to go off and try to find it. There also could be a deeper part of it where it's like built into you have a parasite that's been possessed, right? Because that's such a low life form that's easy to be possessed by a spiritual entity. So maybe that somehow gets passed on as well, in your quote unquote genealogy.
Yeah, and that's a scientific thing too, that you
Yes,
pass on
DNA.
parasites because you have sex. It's the DNA. It's like the parasite essentially merges with
Attaches to
the
the DNA.
structure,
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm.
it just gets passed on, and then it comes up for us, and
You have the ability to cut it off or
Right.
keep it attached.
and it's super hard at times. Obviously, I went through the gamut of different things that were not good. And when I was a kid growing up, I always said, yeah, I got the bad combinations, all the worst attributes from both of my parents. And I would always say that when I was a teenager. Like, I just got all their bad attributes. I had a bad back, I had bad knees, I had so many different like issues that I shouldn't have had as a teenager. And I was just like, yeah, I got all the bad things from both of my parents.
Yeah. I heard you say something about, thinking everything's demons. Do you think that is because like I think most of the entities that we sort of communicate with or encounter in this realm are probably more of like the fallen angels, right? Because in the Bible you have the story of, I think it's Daniel 10:12 or something like that, where the archangel Michael is having to battle to get here, and it takes him like 21 days to actually get here. And so I think perhaps it could be that, a lot of these spirits and stuff that people are working with and channeling are actually demons, and I think that's definitely a possibility because we are in that realm that is of the lower frequency.
Yeah, demons, fallen angels, earthbound or unclean spirits that haven't moved on to higher realms. That's is essentially what we're all working with, and we don't know this because not they the unclean and earthbound spirits don't necessarily know it as well. They're dead and they think, oh, this is what death is. We're just go to the other side and it's still earth, but they just can't see us. We're in the unseen realm, and they think that that is heaven, but it's not heaven. Paul describes it as 7 layers of heaven. That would be the first layer of heaven, if you will, that you're here, but like you're turned inside out and people can't see you then. And that is like the lowest level of heaven, because it's not heaven as we know it, this beautiful, peaceful place. It's just the unseen realm. And when we're communicating with things, see, the issue with people channeling and getting things from the ether is that we just assume that those things are there to help us. I don't know why, but we just assume that they're there to help us. And when we start to really filter our information through the Bible, and I'll say through the book of Enoch as well, because this is what really gave me a good understanding of it, is that those who fell, their biggest problem was that they were supposed to be watching the earth and not participating in it.
Right.
And when they started participating with the humans and messing with things because they thought they knew better than God, that is what caused them to fall. And their interaction with humanity is, to me, as my understanding, is their biggest sin. So when we have beings helping us, they're not giving us their names. There's plenty of people who are like me, and I'm not saying I'm special, but who do work in the unseen realms and have this understanding happening that they're being helped, but I'm never given a name. I see different faces and things at different times, and some of them I'm helping ascend by having them accept Jesus Christ as God. Some of them are very weird creatures that are probably angels. Sometimes I see Jesus himself. There's a lot of different things I see, but I'm never given names outside of Jesus Christ. No one ever, nothing that ever comes to me ever tells me its name. Now, why would that be? Because they don't want to be known. Because if they give me their name, then they're interacting. Now, my own thoughts, knowing their name, can draw them down because now I have their name. And when you have something's name, anyone who knows anything about magic, having a name is greatly important. You can call things to you if you have their name. So things in those realms just don't give up their name unless they are here, because then they want you to call on them. They don't want you to call on Jesus Christ, the Lord and Savior. So it's very simple when you understand it, that they're they can help us. They really do. There are things going on that we can't comprehend, but they'll never introduce themselves to you. I mean, I don't want to say never, because there are some people with special abilities, but for the most part, they're not going to introduce themselves to you. They're not going to channel. That's definitely not going to happen. You're not going to be speaking for an angel. An angel wants to speak to someone, it will go to them in their thoughts, in their sleep. However, it's not going to, oh, I pick you that you're going to speak for me. That's just not how it works. Like, it's a very weird thing, but once you have the understanding that Jesus Christ can reach all of us and the angels are just extensions of him, that they just want to be known as Jesus, they don't want to be known as them, then it puts everything into perspective and you understand it on a much deeper, simpler level.
Yeah, here's another kind of interesting question in that same topic. Do you think that the fallen angels have the ability, and perhaps some of them maybe have the desire, to get back to God, to get back in good grace?
Well, I think that we're in a time period. See, I myself think that I was one of the fallen, and now, for whatever reason, I was granted the opportunity to become human so that I could go back, because I realized the error of my way before I was allowed to become human. So I do think that many of us on earth now are those who were given the opportunity, whether it's a second chance because we messed up big time in one previous life, where Atlantis fell or whatever, and or we are the Nephilim that for whatever reason were given a chance to become human. Uh, there's just there's a I don't know how it happened, but there
Like
are
on the redemption tour.
yeah, essentially that somehow we were given an opportunity to go back because we really did want to. So God granted us this opportunity to become human, and we had to live out a microcosm in a very short amount of time what we caused our ancestors to experience. So we experienced a lot of trauma in a very short amount of time because that is what we caused to this ancestor, this one, this one, this one. That's why I have so much trauma in my experience because I caused so much to so many that I had to experience in a short amount of time. And then when the time came and I woke up, okay, well, then it's now I understand what's going on and I lead
So
people
I can
back
remember
to
why you were
Christ.
here to begin with.
Right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I once had the thought that the story of the prodigal son, to me, it sounds a lot like the story of Lucifer, right? He was
Yeah.
he was given all of this stuff. He was, he was like the firstborn, right? Or something like that. Anyways, he was like an important person. He was loved by the family, but he took his inheritance and he went and did, a bunch of stuff that he ended up losing it. And it wasn't necessarily, great stuff, constructive stuff that he was doing. And I see that, maybe that's sort of the story of Lucifer as well. Like, yeah, like God wants his leader of worship, his leader to come back to him, but he has to make that choice. I don't know.
Right, yeah, he gave us all free will and he wants us to freely choose to come back. So,
Right.
I don't know how the abominations work and why they're called abominations is because they're just not of the same spirit. So they don't have a place. Like I say it all the time with
Real
the
quick,
way
sorry
that
to cut you off, but are you talking about when you say abominations, like more of like the beings that were perhaps created like by the fallen angels, like
yeah.
not necessarily by God?
Yeah, the DNA that the fallen angels messed with, which created the quote unquote Nephilim, which would be the abominations, which could be like the Egyptian gods with the bird head and the
Mm-hmm.
or animal bodies, just weird different type of stuff that's going on. That they then became the demons,
Right.
the spirits of these physical beings are the demons and why they're rejected is because they just don't have a place to go. Like if we were to create sentient AI computers and robots and then we killed the hardware, the outer shell, but the sentience still would live on, it would have nowhere to go. And essentially that's what they did.
Yeah.
But we're in a place now that mirrors heaven, but it's like a very corrupt place right now because it's a corrupted heaven. So like we are the proxies for God down here. And so they were created on a higher scale and they just like came here. Whereas if we then did that to the sentience would then probably move into the abyss and try to create its own thing the way that the Nephilim have been creating their own thing here. And it's a weird kind of concept, but you have to look at it on a dimensional scale, as above, so below, microcosms, macrocosms, that somewhere there's lower realms than here, and that gets into the abyss and hell and all sorts
Sheol.
of Sheol and all sorts of different things like that that maybe are inside of the earth, but they're maybe outside in outer space as we know it. So it's a weird type of thing to think about.
Yeah, but for anyone listening, I think that does sort of help describe the differences between demons and fallen angels. Is like the fallen angels were at one time in heaven and have more authority and were created by God. versus I think what we at least interpret as demons being more of the like either man-made or fallen angel-made abominations wasn't part of God's perfect will, but part of God's permissible will. Like he allows things to happen, but he also has a plan and a purpose for everybody that he would, it's perfect if we choose to accept it.
Yeah, the fallen angels and demons are definitely separate. I haven't really come across too many people that have made the connection saying that they're one and the same. I have one person who keeps harping on it, but I don't know why. There's not evidence for it. I think he just wants to stand out. But whatever, I love the guy still, so it is what it is. But yeah, there are definitely differences. The fallen angels are the ones who are in charge. They are the ones who are running the show, whereas their children are the Nephilim, are the demons, and they still exist because they are spirits that somehow their consciousness can still get transferred into humans, and this gets into clones and why the abduction phenomena happens, and they're still mutating the human DNA, mixing it with the different beings that are on Earth, as well as their own DNA to create biological mannequins so that they can inhabit them. That's kind of how
Yeah.
it works.
Which isn't hard to believe if you look at what we're doing now. I mean, to me, it seems like we're trying to create, these sort of cyborg entities that, if you look at sort of the history of technology and where we got it, it's kind of hard to see, like, where did this all actually come from? Like, was it because most of the geniuses and people who come up with this stuff, they usually say, yeah, like, these thoughts just kind of came to me. And so it's like, who was putting those thoughts in their heads, and what is the final agenda with all this?
Yeah. And when we were talking about channeling, the reason why I say don't trust any of it is because they're tricksters. And it's talked about all throughout history that there's these tricksters that whisper to you. They present themselves as angels of light, but once you see the true light, they start attacking you. The same forces that helped me start awakening and bringing me to the understandings of the astral realms of different things, they also started attacking me when I
Yeah.
started getting towards Jesus Christ, and I started battling them. The same beings that were quote unquote helping me were then attacking me because they were helping me so that I would further their agenda by leading people away from Jesus Christ and leading them into a thought that they too can be God, or
Right.
that these other things should be worshipped. These aliens they're so much better than we are. And this is why I know this is because they turned on me as soon as I saw the true light. The first thing that I ever saw on a psychedelic trip was Jesus's image, his face, and I was told by something else that he is not for me. That was the first thing, and he smiled and he winked and he nodded. It was like his head was like sideways when he nodded. And it was now I understand that he was like, yeah, like he winked. He's like, yeah, I'm not for you. Wink, wink. But they did tell me, they said, if you ever need his assistance, you can call on him and he'll help you, which is
Yeah.
true. But that is also the mindset that he's just one of these ascended masters, that it was an avatar. But when you start to break down history, like, okay, there was all of these quote unquote Jesus like characters that were being born every 500 to 1,000 years. Then Jesus happened and it stopped.
Yeah.
Why
It's
did
just
it?
more twisted truths.
Right. Why would
Yeah.
it stop if it was happening every so often? Because God is just sending himself down in different ways. Why'd it stop? I mean, that's a question that can't be answered if you believe in the pantheon that it was just happening that way, that we're now 2,000 years removed, allegedly, and it hasn't happened. It should have happened at least 2 more times by now, if not 4. Where are all of these ascended masters? Why did they leave us? Are we in a time period of perfect bliss that we don't need them? I don't think so. I don't think anyone would come to that conclusion with all of the slavery that was happening just a few hundred years ago, you know? I mean, where is this godlike being unless Jesus was? And what ends up happening is we are now experiencing what we need to experience because we're in the final judgment, that everything is happening according to a certain plan that's been laid out in the Bible, and we're just in a time period that is much closer to Jesus than we think, and we're at a time period that's different than most people think. The 7-year tribulation and the rapture is still to come, whereas I think that it already happened and we're just at the final judgment. And this is maybe why some people do have recollection of a past life, because in the Bible it says that we'll be given a second chance to get into heaven.
Yeah, that's all very interesting. I think maybe we talked about this before, but I don't know if it's necessarily extremely important if you think we're, post-tribulation or pre-tribulation, but I do think that I can see how, it would be a deception for people to think that we are pre-tribulation, because if the rapture hasn't happened yet, then people kind of think, oh, well, it's not too late. Like, I still have a last chance, like once that happens, maybe I'll get my act together for, the last chance kind of thing. But yeah, I think those are all really good points and an interesting perspective that I encourage everyone to think about and pray about.
Yeah, well, that's the thing with reincarnation, is I think that is the deception, is that you're just here for experience and it doesn't matter what it is, because you'll come back again as someone else, as some other force, that you'll be maybe a male, maybe a female, maybe you're a different skin tone, maybe you're in a different area. I think that's the deception.
Yeah, that's
And
good.
it's really this thing where people say, well, if you only get this one opportunity and someone lives in a place that has never heard about Jesus, are they not accepted? And they say, well, I can't believe that. So then I believe reincarnation is real. But if you believe reincarnation is real, then you believe that that person heard of Jesus at some point and rejected him, because if they didn't reject him, then they would be in heaven. So you get to a place where you can debunk people's own thoughts with their own thoughts, and they don't put these thoughts together, they don't string them along in the same way to understand that, okay, well, if you think this, then this would have occurred, and then that this would have occurred, and then it just starts blowing their mind when you put it together for them that way, and then they could have a change of heart. But I think that, like, in that scenario, it's not measured by the name on your tongue. The tongue is the father of all lies. It's measured by what's in your heart and what's in your head of, why am I doing things? Am I doing things to benefit me? Am I doing things to benefit others? And even if you don't know the name of Jesus, but you're saying, God, you're calling God Allah, that you have one God, that you're helping your fellow brothers and sisters in your area because God wants you to do it, well, that person's going to go to heaven. And it doesn't matter if they practice Islam and they've been reading the Quran, because they've been misled by humans who have been talking. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily wrong. It's very close to the Bible. So it's just this weird thing that people want to take sides as soon as you say something. They want to be offended. They don't want to actually think about things. They want to react in an emotional way, not in a spiritual and mental way.
Yeah, and I believe that. I would have to find the verse. I encourage people to look for it if they're interested. But I do believe the Bible talks about, like, people will be judged by their heart and, like the light that's in their heart. So I do think that, people in rainforests who have never heard about Jesus, who are living, very simple lives, I think they will be judged by what's in their heart. And I think we can all sort of know inherently kind of the difference between good and evil, and we can be persuaded and pushed in one direction or the other, but I do think that discernment is in us, and we kind of know what we're doing.
Well, okay, and now I want to get your take on this because this is something that's popped up in my thoughts a few times here. So, as I'm reading the Gospels, uh, Jesus says, and maybe this is going along with the line that you just said that people will be judged by their hearts. I think it's right around the same spot that Jesus says, people who lose their are willing to give up their lives uh, will have eternal life, and people who hate their lives will continue to live those lives eternally. And now this brought up the thought to me, is this the concept of NPCs, that this that people just become animatronic, they become robotic, and that they're living out the same thing over and over, and this is maybe why psychics and mediums or whatever, they sometimes they come up with the idea that, oh, you've done this before, that this has happened to you before, you're playing out the same thing over and over. Is that what Jesus is talking about? That those who hate their lives but don't give it over to God, but keep it for themselves, they will eternally live on. And is that an NPC? What's your thoughts on that?
So those who hate their lives, is, from what I understand, isn't that verse talking kind of about more of like if you're holding close to your life, like to this world, like if you more love the world, then you're not going to essentially get to the next part because you're so consumed with this world. That's kind of, I think, if that's the verse you're talking about, I think that's how I understood it when I read it, was like, if you're going to give up your earthly life in order to focus and prioritize your spirit, then you're going to go to the next realm. You're going to, be in
Right.
heaven. But if you hold on to it here, then you're going to be here, like, because God doesn't want to force you out of somewhere that you actually want to be.
Right.
And so that's kind of how I perceive it. I think I kind of bring up this topic when I'm talking about violence and like, because there's like a strong movement on like the far right or whatever who like they claim to be Christian but they're still like, I need all my weapons and my guns and I'm gonna light
Right.
anybody up who disagrees. To me, it's like, well, you're more concerned with your earthly body than you are of your spirit. Like, if you were
Mhm.
really concerned with your spirit, you wouldn't want to harm anybody. And even if they disagree with you or if they're even threatening you, you would be willing to lose your life to gain your spiritual life. If that does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's beautifully said. So, yeah, I was in agreement with everything you're saying until I read it and it said you will keep your life eternally, and it just brought in the thought, well, about past lives because I'm trying to really understand what's going on and how different people uh, they see that the same life is being lived out. Now, I understand that the physical body is living out the same thing, possibly living out the same thing over and over, but the spirit inside is different, and that the soul is the one that is never reincarnating. The soul is just moving about through life. And so that's where the idea of possibly an NPC of living life eternally that and it does in my version anyway, in the New International Version says those who hate their life will live it eternally, saying those who want to do this, that if they don't want to give it up, that they're going to keep doing it. So it's weirdly worded in this version, I guess. But that's what just brought into my mind that there are somehow NPCs that their consciousness is merging with physicality, and then they become these animatronics rather than move on and ascend into heaven.
Well, so what about that makes you think though that they're not like self-aware?
No, not that they're not self-aware,
Well,
just
because
that
when
they
you say
become part of the matrix.
NPC though, like I guess what do you mean? Because when I think of NPC, I think of like they're more of just an extension of the matrix, if you want to call it
Right.
that. Like they're part of the program, but they're not necessarily self-aware of like what they're doing or their choices.
Well, I think that they just become so programmed that they're not making new choices, that they've made their choice to give themselves over to this earthly nature, and that they're just part of the matrix. They're an extension of it.
I mean, I think
But they always have the choice to move out of it, but they have to make that free will choice.
Yeah, I think that happens, without people dying or not. You
Right.
see people, they become NPC-like. I don't know if they're necessarily designed that way, but they become so sort of brainwashed and put in this environment where it's like, yeah, they start acting like NPCs because they're not thinking critically. They're not, they're just kind of going with what they're told. But I think that's more of like a brainwashing and like a spell than it is, I guess, them being programmed as NPCs, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And maybe
But
I
I
want
think your
to,
concept is pretty much right. I think it's
yeah,
just we're maybe having semantics here on what like an
right.
NPC is.
Different, yeah, different understandings, different perspectives. But Mimi, I want to get your opinion on this and then get into what you were bringing up earlier. So, what's your take on that?
Oh, you caught me at the wrong time to ask questions like that.
Well, so okay, all right. So, what did you want to get into earlier? I want to bring you back into the conversation. You've been quiet for some time now.
Oh, I just have Bible information. That's all I really have is just information on the different versions and
I'd love to hear
how
all of
the
that.
King James came about and all of that good stuff.
All right, go ahead.
Let's hear about it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a it's a lot.
All right, so give
So
us a
King
little
the
bit.
highlights.
So you'd have to go back to the Geneva Bible, which isn't the oldest Bible, of course. I mean, we go from God to Moses, and then we get into like the actual written versions.
Oh, could I hop in just for 1 second? I actually talked to a gentleman. I was on his podcast called Refuge Freedom Stories. It won't be out till September, but
Mhm.
his name is John Taverner, and his I don't know, great ancestor
Yeah, the
wrote the Taverner Bible. It's a
Taverner's Bible,
yeah, it's a translation that occurred just before the King James
which is a
version.
version I've never heard of before. There's so many I have never heard of before because there's just so many.
Right.
Everybody wants to create a new version of the Bible.
Right.
So I don't even know if I'll even have these facts straight, but the Geneva Bible was looking to be updated, and at this time King James was King James of Scotland. And he advocated for the updating of this Geneva Bible. And he took part in it. And so it was changed. Then when he found out that he was heir to the throne of, what was it, England, I think, right? I'm not sure.
Probably.
Then he decided that the Geneva Bible needed to be updated again because it didn't quite fit his role politically. He felt like it went against, there were certain things in there that went against the ruler, let's just say, his spot as king. So then he advocated to have it changed again. And that's how we got the King James Bible. But of course, they brought in all these scholars and important people to make it look like it's going to be the best of the best and everything's going to be legit. And they had different councils for different sections of the Bible. And basically what they did was kind of trick certain people into, because they would have these meetings where if they didn't agree on a certain translation, they would have a meeting until they did agree. And they kind of tricked this one group into agreeing almost every time. They finagled it in a way that they could get them into agreement. But that's pretty much all I have so far on the Geneva Bible, or sorry, the King James Bible and how it came about. So after King James, I'm not sure which one comes after the King James version, but I know of the ones I've been looking at are Geneva Bible, the Great Bible.
Oh, I never heard of that.
Yeah, that's one of the earlier ones. I gotta go to my old notes that are in the back of my Bible.
Did you say the Greek Bible? By that, did you mean the Septuagint?
No, the Great Bible. There's
a Great
there's
Bible.
a Great Bible. Yeah, there's so many.
Yeah, the Septuagint was sort of the Bible that we had before it was translated, or after it was translated from Hebrew, because we had to sort of make that transition because they were spreading the gospel and a lot of people spoke Greek, and so they ended up translating it into the Septuagint. And it said that Jesus referenced, like, a lot of the scriptures he referenced are in the Septuagint, and I just found out about this, so I need to look into it more. But
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
that
I
is
was getting into that one
I think
right
that's an
before
interesting
this.
part of this that is good to listen into. But yeah, this is all great points and why it's
Yeah, and
important to go back to the Hebrew.
there's even versions before the Septuagint, the Latin Vulgate and all these codexes that they found on, scrolls and things. So
Yeah, I
there's
think
a lot to get into, and I'm gonna have to, I'm perfecting my notes so that I can kind of do it in
a linear fashion.
a linear fashion from start to finish. But there's so many jumps that I have to keep kind of rewording my notes.
I guess we'll do a bonus episode on it.
Yeah, that'd be fun, and I would
so
love to
much.
help we could put together a timeline kind of to help see all that.
That's
that'd be
exactly
awesome.
what I'm doing. I have like number 1, number 2, number 3, and I'm trying to get a good orderly fashion to my notes because I don't like to speak without knowing what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think a important thing to remember is, like, we need to look at sort of the Dead Sea Scrolls and see kind of what those are, because from my understanding, those helped sort of confirm what we already had in the canon, of what we get. Like, we got the King James, but then the Dead Sea Scrolls kind of confirmed a lot of that from how I understand it. So yeah, that would definitely be a good part to go into as well.
Yeah.
Now, I do have one more little piece here to talk to you about, because you and we talk about different things like this when we message each other back and forth, is that I am trying to figure out exactly who Jesus was when we're talking about Jesus in the Bible. And I have an understanding of the Spirit very well, that Jesus Christ can come through all of us. He can manifest through all of us in all these different ways. And at one time I was talking about John the Baptist having Jesus come through him. I was assuming John the Baptist wrote the Gospel of John. I had never heard that the Gospel of John was written by John.
The disciple John.
Yeah, that because it's not really talked about. I just assumed, and I had never heard otherwise. So, do you have any information on that John?
Yeah, well, so my dad actually brought up a good point when we were chatting about all this Bible stuff last night. He mentioned, I have to find the verse, but he said there's this part in John where John is sort of bragging about beating, I think it was Paul, to the grave. Like, he's like almost like bragging about, like, oh, well, I love Jesus so much that I'm gonna beat you to the grave, or beat you to heaven, or something like that. And so my dad said there's like almost this moment of arrogance where it does kind of show you that, yeah, that was most likely written by John the disciple. John, yeah, the apostle. Those are kind of I guess there's a difference. Like, I think apostle was like post Judas maybe, or something like that. There's some sort of difference between disciple and apostle when those words are used, but they're essentially the same people. And yeah, John was the son of Zebedee and his brother James as well. So yeah, I think that there is a lot of credence to believing that is who wrote the Gospel of John.
He's possibly the first cousin of Jesus, is what I have been reading.
Hey, he's supposed to be like 6 months older than Jesus.
Yeah.
So it's
my understanding that John the Baptist wrote no books in the Bible.
Right,
even though Jesus called him the greatest prophet who ever lived, he didn't write any of the Gospels.
Right, but someone like me who's an outsider, and I'm sure many of my listeners will be surprised to hear it's not John the Baptist didn't write the Gospel of John, and also he's not the John that wrote the book of Revelation either. It's John of Patmos. Is John of Patmos the same person as the son of Zebedee?
I'd have to look into that one more. I'm not sure on that one.
Yeah, I think Mimi came up with something, didn't you, Mimi?
No, I just have a few notes on John, the apostle, because he's John the apostle, John the evangelist, son of Zebedee. He wrote John 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, Revelations. Yes.
Okay, so he did write Revelation.
And the only other stuff I have on John the Baptist was that I had read somewhere that he was actually baptized in the belly of Elizabeth by Gabriel. So everybody always says, who is John the Baptist baptized baptized by. And so I'm assuming that would be
Didn't-
Angel Gabriel, maybe.
Yeah, I have no idea. I haven't heard
Oh.
that. I would love to hear more about that. I
Yeah, I'm
thought
not
he
sure
was
where
baptized by
I,
Jesus at one point, though, wasn't he?
No, he baptized Jesus, John the Baptist.
Oh, that's right. Jesus
Yeah.
had him baptized. Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Which is weird because so when we start getting into all these names, Mark, his actual name was John as well. I'm reading the book of Acts, and his name was John.
They had
So
to keep it straight. They had to give him nicknames.
Oh well, Simon Peter, and then
Yeah.
he
Can't have
turns
5
into
Johns running
Peter,
around.
and then
yeah, you got Paul,
Saul and Paul.
Oh, and then Jesus had a brother named James.
And then they're like,
John had a brother named
we
James.
expect you to keep this all straight. So
Yeah, it's really weird to me that it's written in Greek, and I know you're just talking about the Septuagint, which I have to get into that because that's interesting. But it was allegedly taking place where people talk Hebrew or speak Hebrew, write in Hebrew, but it's all written in Greek much later by people who actually weren't there, except for John the Apostle. But why is he writing in Greek if he was Hebrew? You know,
probably because he wanted to pass it on, because like Hebrew wasn't really, like, Greek was taking over, and the people in that time were required to learn and speak Greek. And so if you look into, I don't remember his name, but he had like a disciple of his own, and he sort of helped keep on the story of John. And so, yeah, I think he was probably writing in Greek so that people would understand it, the people he was actually talking to.
Well,
and
it's interesting.
I do think looking into the Septuagint would kind of help maybe fill in some of those gaps.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that it would get translated to Jesus, or from Jesus to Jesus rather than to Joshua or to Yeshua. You know, it's a weird thing where it gets translated from Greek to Hebrew to English rather than but sometimes it's from Greek to English and then back to Hebrew. It's not always consistent. And the name Jesus to me is the Father. When I look at it and I understand things, that the Son would be Yeshua, the Holy Spirit would be Yahweh or Yahuwah, and the Father would be Jesus Christ himself. And that's why so many people called him Jesus. And I think that he was coming through many different people around the same time. What's really eye-opening to me is when King Herod, he hears about Jesus preaching, and he goes, I killed that guy already, didn't I? And he's talking about John the Baptist when he beheaded him, because John the Baptist was preaching in the same manner, doing similar things. And then it turns out that story is in the Gospel of John, but it's not John the Baptist that wrote the Gospel of John. It's another John who was with Jesus, and he's the disciple who's called the disciple whom Jesus loved. And it's just a weird thing that, did he love him because that was the body that he came through him most strongly in? I mean, it's just a very weird space, because there's not really stories. Like when we're in the Gospels, there's Simon Peter is mentioned in all of the Gospels, but other than him and Judas Iscariot, I mean, the other disciples are all mentioned at times, but there's not stories outside of Simon Peter and Judas who are talked about in all of them. John isn't mentioned in all of them in the same fashion that you think that he would be if he is the disciple whom Jesus loved. Is it because sometimes he was John and sometimes he was Jesus talking, just like sometimes you can hear Todd coming through, other times you can hear Emmanuel coming through. You know, it's a very weird thing of the spirit taking over the physical body, because what we all do in the name of Jesus Christ is we give ourselves over and we no longer want to be seen. So I can very easily see that a bunch of people who were very close to Christ, you know, whether internally or externally, people who were very close to God were claiming that Jesus is doing these things, that, you know, they were turning water into wine, and they said, no, I didn't do it. Todd didn't do it. Jesus did it. You know, I could see that very much being what was going on.
Yeah, and I think that's a very interesting perspective. I'm still trying to fully grasp it when I'm reading and seeing if I can come to that conclusion. I guess to me, it does still seem like there was a physical Jesus who had a different name than all of the other disciples and who was given the title of Christ. You know, that was not his last name, that was his
Right.
title that he was given. And to me, he was always going to be with the Father. Like, and so that's always what he referred to God as the Father. Like every time, pretty much, he calls him the Father. So for me, it's like when I see Jesus, I don't think he was like talking in the third person. Like I'm gonna go talk to myself. If that makes sense, you know,
Well,
I don't know.
it actually. So what you're saying is actually that because
Well,
of
he would call himself the Son of God all the
well,
time.
so yeah,
Yeah.
and when he talks to the Father, he is calling himself the Father because back in those days, this is what the big problem was that the Jews had, is that a son is equal to his father. So calling him the Father meant he was equal to God. And that is why it was such a big problem
Hmm.
because he was saying by claiming God was his father, he was claiming he was God. And that was really the whole of what all the hubbub was about, you know, that
Well,
And it also would depend on the scribes of whatever chapters you're reading as well, because you're not getting the first person account, you're getting someone else's account because they are scribing these chapters.
I mean, I think he was he would always say, "What do you call me?" Like
Mhm.
he was oftentimes. I don't think he was necessarily saying
Mhm.
like, "I am God." I think
no, he
he
in
was.
the book of John, the Gospel of John, he says
Oh, it's just in
the
Matthew.
Father, but even like he's not necessarily saying he is God. He does come out and say that once or so, but or not that he is God, that he is the Son of God. But that is the equivalent back in those days. That would be the equivalent to saying I am God by
Well,
saying that.
I think it would give him, you know, credence, and it would make him like they thought he was claiming to be the Messiah. And with that, it would be power. And yeah, you if God gave you that power, then yes, you know, I am the Father are one. So again, he is saying that, but I think there is enough distinction in the Bible where it's like you know, the Trinity. It's like they're three parts of one entity essentially.
Yeah.
So I
So
don't know. Do you believe in the Trinity though, right? Because you're saying there's these different
yeah,
parts.
there's the different parts that
Yeah.
are all one. So my idea of the
So
Trinity is that outside of here in heaven, it's all spiritual. It's not physical the way that we know it to be physical. It's not as dense as we are. So Jesus Christ exists out there as Jesus Christ. When he comes into the physical world as the spirit, he would be known as Yahweh. And then when he enters the physical body, he would be known as Yeshua. But it's still one and the same. It's just from one realm to another, and then from one dimension to another inside that same realm. So, or one like physicality from spirit to physical. I think that's the Trinity, that he is one and the same, but it's just how he enters in has to be noticed that it's a noticeably different thing. Being a spirit in the physical world is different than being a spirit in the spirit world, and being physical in the physical world is different than being a spirit in the physical world.
yeah, I guess I think that he's not here in the physical world, but he's working through the Holy Spirit within us. He had to leave so that the Holy Spirit so we could be filled with the Holy Spirit, and then we act as the flesh. We're acting as Jesus here on earth, using his example that he gave us while he was here incarnated.
Right.
I think that's my perspective, and maybe we are kind of saying the same thing, but it's just semantics a little bit. Yeah, maybe not. I don't know. We could definitely dive into it deeper. I think that because there's when he was here on Earth and he was saying like, "Why do you call me good? Like God is good. I am just doing what He says." When He died on the cross, He was separated, and He said, "Why have you forsaken me? Father, why have you forsaken me?" And so at that moment, he was literally like cut off from the Trinity. He took on the sins of the world, and he was cut off. So for me, you can see that sort of distinction where he is cut off, but the Father is still above him. He's saying, "Father, why have you forsaken me?"
Right. Yeah, he was understanding because he was very physical at that moment, and he's understanding our
Right.
pain that they feel that they're without God, that they're suffering, and he really understood in that moment why people think God forsakes them, or that they curse God because they think God's doing something bad to them by not saving them in that exact moment. I think that was a very human moment for him, probably his most human moment that's recorded. And with the Bible, the Gospels, it's when we have Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they weren't there. They're retelling a story. It's being told in like some of them are leaving out whole big pieces, and other ones are telling the story in a vastly different way, and just certain aspects. Now, for the most part, it's all the same, but there are certain aspects that are being changed or left out. And then when I'm reading the book of Acts, in two different spots, it says the Jews are being condemned for hanging Jesus from a tree, which could be lynching, that it's not actually being crucified on a cross the way it's talked about in all the other in the Gospels, the four Gospels. It's not talked about in that way. That they always say that he was carrying the cross and that he was crucified on the cross. It doesn't say hung from a tree. So it's a very weird thing when you start to understand that they weren't there, that they're relaying a message that was told to them. So I do think Jesus was here as one man, as I'm saying, Yeshua. And he says in the gospel that in order for, he uses the parable when a piece of wheat, I think, or maybe it's something else, but when it dies, then its seed can be spread out in a much more grand way once it dies. And he was leading to himself dying for others to become the light and everyone else, to become our moral compasses. So I do believe that that happened. It's just a very strange thing when we're trying to pin down exactly what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could sort of look at that as like hanging, because he was hanging from, you know, what was made of wood, and like I was saying, the Hebrew language was very like limited, and they didn't have like specific words for a lot of things. It
Right.
was, and so maybe, and if it's
Could
more
be
of a third party,
translation.
like this is what I heard, it maybe is not going to be as specific. But
Well,
again, that's
this
kind of the beauty of it, because you have these different stories from third parties, from different perspectives, but they're essentially saying the same thing, which is kind of what
right.
lends credence to it being historical.
Well, I think one of the times it was said was by Stephen, which I don't know if he was at the crucifixion, but I think one of the times was Simon Peter was saying it. And what's interesting is that Mark is the one who wrote Acts, and he's the one who wrote the Gospel of Mark. So why would he use two different phrases? Or maybe it's not in the Hebrew, maybe it's not, or in the Greek, I'm sorry, it's not different phrases. But why would it then be translated into the Bible that I'm reading as different phrases? Because it's, I go into the book of Mark, it doesn't say anything about hanging from a tree. But yes, it could be, you could be calling it that. But it's also, why isn't translated one to
Yeah.
one?
I just
Is
had
someone trying to confuse everybody?
Yeah, where I just had the
Which
thought
is
based
the
on what Mimi said. She was talking about how they had the different sort of groups in charge of different parts. So maybe you had different groups who were interpreting things differently, and that's maybe why you see that. Because yeah, I like the first translation I brought up, right? We have in Genesis, they translated I have in my notes, what is it?
Tanin.
Tanin. Yeah, they translated that as whale, but it's mostly used as serpent or dragon. Mostly is the most common. It's like serpent 3 times and then dragon like 21 times. So yeah, you definitely have this mix of like essentially what seems to be the same word but being translated into English very differently.
yeah.
And you said you
With
got the chills, Mimi, when I said that last part.
no, with the Bible translator, there was 54 translators, and they were separated into 6 groups. 3 of which they called companies. 3 of those were dedicated to the Old Testament. 2 of them were dedicated to the New Testament, and 1 was dedicated to the Apocrypha. So, when you have a bunch of different people in a room, trying to agree on something,
Yeah.
Yeah, and you could even have like certain, like, they might think, well, because of this context, maybe this word means this, and so they're trying to, because the Hebrew was limited, they're trying to make their best guess, but maybe now that we have hindsight, we're able to notice things that they weren't at the time.
Right.
Right, and to have the most companies dedicated to the Old Testament, to me, would mean that it's probably the hardest to get correct.
Mm-hmm.
They needed more people.
Yeah, they need more
Needed
manpower.
more minds and more scholars and more revisers and all of that.
And I think a very significant part I learned from Nathaniel Gillis is that the demons, when they're trying to uh, have human women bear their children, bear their image, is they're trying to impregnate the woman with themselves so that they can be born into the physical world. And because of all that was going on, that God, Yahweh, Yahuwah, Yahuwah, however, you could pronounce it, did the same to Mary and then bore himself out as Yeshua. And I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me that he would be like, "Oh, you want to do that? Then I'll do that too, and watch what happens." Because it's, they do have, for lack of a better word, they have a pissing contest with Moses. When how we started talking about this whole conversation was they, throw down the rod, and it's like a battle of magi essentially. And then God is like, "Oh yeah, you think you can do this? Watch!" And then he parts the Red Sea, and then they get collapsed by the Red Sea collapses on them. It's like they can do everything that he can do to a certain extent, but then there's things that they can't do. And that is why the demons even knew that Jesus was the Messiah and was saying different things of that nature of, you've come too early, you aren't supposed to be here yet, why did you come to take me before it's my time?
Mm-hmm.
They're crying out to him through humans before anyone else thinks anything. They knew, they could recognize the spirit within. So I do think that he was completely in one man, but also at the same time, I think that the spirit is so large that it was still coming through others, and others like Simon had to be changed into Peter, and Saul was changed into Paul. I know that was later on, and John was changed into Mark, and different things like that were occurring as well. And the last question I have for you is, we have Jesus, I think that's his name, Barbarous, as it's talked about in the Bible, but I think his first name was Jesus. And when they were given the option, the Jews were given the option, who should we release, Barabbas or Jesus of Nazareth? They picked Barabbas.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that a doppelganger of Jesus? Because then Barabbas starts preaching the word of Jesus later on, alongside Saul, Paul, and John, Mark. Was that a doppelganger, or is that maybe where we get the name Jesus? Was it taken from that person and put on our God?
Yeah, my perspective is that was Bizarro Jesus. That was like the inverted Jesus, because how I understand it is he was more of the mindset that we need to have a revolution, a physical revolution. We need to conquer. We need to, take back the empire, like these kind of things, which is what the Jews were looking for, and they still are. They're still looking for that entity that's going to come and like physically change things. Versus Jesus, who was crucified on the cross, as we know it, Jesus Christ, he had the opposite mentality, but it was like the inverted mentality of like, no, it's like, if you love this world, you're not going to experience the next one. If you're fighting for this world, you're not going to experience the next one. It's about the spirit. It's about evolving your soul to be more kind, like, and selfless. That was everything he was about, which is totally different than anything I've ever heard from anyone, and is why I fully believe in Jesus, because it to me has changed my life and how I operate. But it's very counterintuitive. Like really learning how to pray for your enemies, that changes your spirit and your heart in a way that is transformative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I think that's beautifully said. And yeah, Barabbas, he was a murderer. He was
Yeah.
a political guy, and Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, at that time, he was not. He was meek, and but not just meek. He stood up against evil where he could, and otherwise, he taught people how to better themselves. It wasn't just the Buddhist mentality of attaining godhood in oneself
Right.
by enlightening oneself, but it's also stopping evil where evil exists, and that is, I think, the difference in ourselves and praying for our enemies is one of those things which is extremely difficult to do, like you said. But when people have done it, like I'll say Kara Mosher, she did that for the person she hated most in the world was Donald Trump, and what that did for her was softened her heart, and now she's in the arms of Jesus Christ in a major way. She, I'm not going to tell her story here, but it's just a phenomenal thing that when you pray for your enemies and you can make peace
It's a
with
very
those who
hard
you
thing
hate, it changes you. It changes your heart.
to send love to someone that has done nothing but rip you down. It's very
Yeah,
hard.
I think that
But
was a
it does change you almost instantly, because once you do it, you're just like, whoa, like it's just transformative
Yeah,
instantly.
I agree, and I think that was a great point on the doppelganger, because we do see that a lot of like very similar names, right, doing kind of similar things, but really when you look into it, it's inverted. And I think that was such a great example in our history of like, yeah, which path are you going to choose? Are you going to choose a physical revolution or a spiritual one?
Yeah. All right. Well, there you have it, folks. This was a great conversation. Do you want to let the people know where they can get your art, your music, and all of your stuff?
Yeah, pretty much have a one-stop shop. You guys can go to nomad.art. That's GNOMAD.art. If you want to check out my music, I also got some clothing, some merch on there. And yeah, I'm also kind of trying to make it, if people are interested in collaborating at all, like I'm kind of using it as an incubator for people who maybe don't know how to set up a website and like sell their own stuff. But if you are interested in being a part of that, let me know and I'll help you get started. And I use it as kind of like, you can kind of sell it off of my site. I'll give you all the profits and everything if you make any. But then once you kind of get on your feet and you want to do it your own, I can help you with that transition too. So yeah, I'm just here to help. If anyone wants to have help with website stuff, music stuff, whatever, reach out and I'm happy to do so.
Awesome. And also, he is in all of my show notes. Ever since I have added the bridge, of course, I have his information in there so that anyone who's interested can always go click on his stuff. So again, I'll include everything in the show notes, but he's in all my show notes. So make sure you go check out Nomad stuff and his podcast as well.
Yeah, the podcast is just Gnomad Podcast. It's on most streaming platforms, so check it out. I definitely recommend YouTube because I try to put together comprehensive slides that help give some visuals to what we're talking about. So yeah, check out the YouTube.
Yeah, he definitely nails it. He's an excellent host, and it's a great visual presentation.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. This has been awesome.
Yeah. Well, before we go out, I got one more question for you.
Okay.
What is your go-to grounding technique in this world full of serpents and eels and leviathans? How do you keep yourself human?
Yeah, for me, it's quiet time, like trying to kind of where I really found Jesus. I mean, I've known of him my whole life, but when I really got connected and like felt the peace that he offers is when I shut out everything that I was being programmed, right? Like we're being programmed from the day we're born, from our parents, from our teachers, from our pastors, from siblings, from friends. They're all trying to tell you kind of what to believe and this and that. But like really, if you want to find truth, get rid of everything you've been taught. Just go in a quiet room somewhere and really just focus and pray and meditate and try and figure out like when I wipe the system, what's left. And for me, I do that every day. I try to do it in the morning and at night. For me, it's the shower. Like I'll turn off all the lights and I'll take a long hot shower and I'll just meditate and pray. And that just helps me really focus, and definitely breathing too. Like, don't forget to breathe. I think we all need to breathe more, which you have a lot of good recommendations on. I know you've had podcasts about that too. So I think that helps us get filled with the breath of life. So those are definitely my tips.
I actually shower with the lights off as well, many times. It's a beautiful thing. We have one of those long, skinny windows, and the sun comes directly through at like near sunset. So I turn off the light, and I'm like, no, just use the natural light. It just feels so much better.
Yeah, well, and I like that too, but I'll like if I can get it pitch dark, that's my favorite because it's like I'm trying to get rid of any sort of external output that's trying to, distract me or might change my perspective, so I can really focus on going inward and connecting with God on a more personal level versus like an earthly level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I love all that. I loved this talk. It was a great conversation. I can't wait to get the Bible study going in a few weeks here. I
Yes.
know that you're going to be a part of it as well. I'm excited for that. I want you to bring all your knowledge. And anyone listening, email me with the subject Bible study, and that way you ensure that you're going to get the email when I send it out for the Zoom link. It's of course free of charge to join. All you got to do is bring yourself and bring whatever Bible you have, a physical copy or an internet copy, whatever you want to look at. Just show up and be ready to talk about the Bible. All right, so that's going to do it. Everybody go check out Nomad stuff, and we will talk to you all later.
Love you
Bye.
guys.